Hey everyone, and welcome to This Week in Caribbean Tech. It's of course your weekly show where we give you unfiltered insights on the latest Caribbean tech and business news coming out of the Caribbean and the rest of the world. So of course, we're going to keep you ahead and keep you, of course, totally in tune with who and what's driving the Caribbean and the world digital economy. My name is Ingrid Riley. I'm CEO of Silicon Caribbean, and with me, my co-host. You're back in the sea, in the 305, you're back in Miami, you're back in DeSantis County, you're back in the most bipolar American state of all of them. Hi, Daniel.
I am Daniel Smith, co-host and CEO of Keepingly. Yes.
Am I lying or am I lying, sir?
Because you try to put my business out on the street, you know. People in bipolar state, I mean, boy, it's really, yeah, boy. I know we'll opine about today's, ruling, but man, I would love to hear what is being heralded in the halls of, places in Miami, in Florida at this state, because, I'm like, we're living in times where people still don't have choices, and it's interesting.
Let's just lead with it, because today, as we're recording on Friday, June 25th, the Supreme Court of the United States ruled against Roe versus Wade. And what that basically means, in essence, that they basically yanked women's rights back to the 1920s, when men preferred their women barefoot and pregnant and obeying them and bringing them dinner at 6 p.m. every evening. So in other words, women do not have rights over their own bodies and do not have any choice over what to do with their bodies when it comes to having a child and having abortion, whether it's been because they have health issues, whether because they were raped or some incest went on or whatever it is. These men decided that no, women do not have rights over their own bodies. But when it comes to Americans and their guns, of course, they have full rights to that. If this wasn't a PG-13 show. But anyway, so that's what happened today. And of course, let me just finish. The sole black man on the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas, with of course a complete letdown to his entire race, went on to say, oh, the Supreme Court should now reconsider other things that were given, like LGBTQ rights and access to contraception. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the black man, the sole black man on the US Supreme Court, again, is helping everybody else to yank America back to the 1920s or maybe the 1800s. So yes, that's what has happened today.
This is the political show, but if I were going according to what his wife has done in January,
his white wife.
I would say
his white Republican wife.
I have no other comment. Yeah. I have no other comment. That's crazy stuff.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And these days I spell America with 3 Ks. I'm sure you get it. And this is not a political show, but as a woman, and yes, I'm Jamaican, but I do have friends, family, colleagues that live in America. I spend a lot of time there. I do business with Americans. It's kind of interesting to see the regression when it comes to access to certain things. So that's what I'll say, and I think I've said enough. So that's all I have to say.
All I would say is, people have rights. People should have choices, and if you don't like the choices, voting is your option at this stage. You can't leave your future in the hands of somebody else. I think I've heard the statement recently by some people is like, I don't like politics, or I don't play politics. And I'm like, interesting. Well, when you say things like that, people take it as their responsibility to make your life a political football. And so we have to realize the choices and the options that we have.
Yeah.
and we have to choose accordingly and appropriately to
Yeah.
make sure that we have the best results, because you know people want you to live sometimes your life based on their agendas.
Yeah.
And if you have choices, you should exercise your choices to make sure that you live the life that you want to live. So that's what I would say.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. But I do urge you, as we go into the news or top five Caribbean and world tech and business news that we chose for you to give you some insight into. Just want to say, go have a look at what has happened to your business partners, your employees, your friends and family in the United States. The women today, they're not okay. All right, so as we go into, we're talking about choices and interesting things happening in the world. Our first news item is the Bank of Jamaica Central Governor, Richard Byles. He pretty much says he doesn't hate crypto, but if you're what he calls a sophisticated investor who understands cryptocurrency, he says, go ahead and use it. We don't see it as a currency, he said, that is good for transactions and for making payments, but primarily for investments. That's really interesting for me. I don't know if it's could be said to be an official position from the Bank of Jamaica or an official position from the Wholeness Administration in Jamaica, but it's an interesting interesting comment from the Bank of Jamaica, especially on the heels of them basically concretizing the rollout of Jamdex, which is their central bank digital currency, which is now legal tender in Jamaica. So yeah, so he says he doesn't hate crypto, but because it's kind of volatile, pretty much like our Jamaican dollar, goes up and down every day, sir. But he doesn't see it as a currency, using it as a currency, but more for investments. Very interesting comment from Mr. Byles. Your thoughts, my dear?
Well, again, the role of central banks are to protect the people, and so to make sure and stabilize the economy, because it's difficult to be in the position of a central banker right now, I would say.
Yeah, very much so.
On the one hand, you have to manage the interests of the people. Number two, you have to manage the interests of those who kind of put you in power, or have you there. So and number three, you have to try to keep up with current trends. So it's a balancing act across the board for central banks at this point in time. And so I could understand his sentiment of, hey, we don't hate it, just like you better know what you're doing, because then if you lose your shit, don't come and call us. Is basically what he's saying. But I mean, it is, and to that end, it is instructive, help people understand the asset class if you want them to, because what I've realized is that those who understand assets understand it. And for those who don't, well, that's kind of your business. And it goes from the most simplest asset class that we have, I would say, which is real estate. And you realize that nobody teaches you about any of these things. So it is instructive. And I think that, there's a thought process of, hey, if people don't know, well, they don't know. Let's keep them ignorant, kind of thing. So it is instructive to, if he's really interested, it would be instructive to kind of help people along understand it so that they don't lose their shit. And at least you can say you've advanced the progress of something.
Yeah, I think it's a healthy first step in terms of a statement from the BOJ central bank governor. I mean, it's cautious, and like pretty much everybody's been right now. It's a listen, if you're gonna get into it, do your homework like everybody else does, and make your decision. But and again, every time I come upon these pro or anti-crypto statements or sentiments from wherever they come from in the ecosystem, in the industry, I always say this, like with Jamaica now, Jamaica has in excess of 40,000 crypto owners. And that's like less than 2% of the population of, 3 million Jamaicans. Early days yet. But it's just that it's not like Jamaicans, there's some Jamaicans who are aware, of the benefits of being in crypto for whatever reason they're in crypto. And so that, and then there are established, private firms that have created offshore funding channels for their high net worth individuals to get exposure to the crypto markets. Now, this is of course interesting, because everybody knows that the crypto markets, just like, a lot of the global stock exchanges are like, pretty much in a bear market right now. I mean, valuations of tech companies, big companies have tanked between 20 to 70, 80%. Crypto is in this winter phase right now. Some people call it's sale time to go in, and if you have cash, to go in and swoop up on some deals. So it's an interesting time where
time.
It all depends on what your risk appetite is. It all depends on how you understand these markets. So yeah, very interesting, cautious first step statement from the central bank governor of Jamaica, Richard Byles. All right, so what's up next for us, sir?
Well, the IDB study finds ICT capacity financing gaps for women in regional gender study. Essentially what it's saying is that the IDB Invest, IDB Lab did a study that said 62% of representatives of major institutions and entities in the digital ecosystem in the Latin America and the Caribbean think that digital gender gap is a problem with their respective countries. And it says the same proportion believes that women have little participation in digital transformation processes because of a lack of skills and competencies.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Riley, to you, 18 years in ICT, you've seen it all.
Well, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot, without question.
You've seen it all in the region.
I don't know about, all in the region.
The modesty, come on.
It's not the modesty. I haven't seen it all. Nobody has seen it all, but I've seen a lot.
I mean, you know exactly a lot of what's going on in the ecosystem in the Caribbean. So
absolutely.
Have you been the only woman in the room? I mean, I'm just coming off this whole issue of women's rights. So yeah, basically, is that number representative, or do we need to do a better job in terms of getting more women to the table, especially for digital transformation?
Absolutely. And digital transformation, just simply getting more women on all levels, from being decision makers in the boardroom, from being taking the reins and launching their own digital first businesses or digital infused businesses, getting women in decision making positions and as executives, and also from our young people, for young women that are coming up, being a bit more deliberate and strategic in how we show women and girls the opportunities that are in the digital space. We've been done a very bad job globally, regionally, nationally, very bad job in saying, hey, people just kind of came up with the idea that if you want to be in tech, you have to know how to code. It's a great skill to have, but there's so, I mean, being in digital, being in tech is just so expansive, so multifaceted, so multidimensional. There are so many opportunities and so many different kinds of skills that are needed, skills that you can transfer from one industry to this industry, from one role to this role with some tweaks. So I just think that it's not shocking. I mean, I've lived it, I've seen it, in almost 20 years I've been in the space, just in the events that I have created and are participated in. You have to beat the bushes to get women to come and pitch their startups. Yeah, they're in the audience, right? Which is great. And that's why, we started like the Caribbean Women in Tech initiative to kind of build and bring those stories forward so people can see, so young girls can see what they can be, right? We have CaribbeanTechWomen.com. We did our first top 50 list last year, and we're doing it again this year. So I'm not surprised. As I said, it's nice to have a benchmark and say, hey, fine, we have X amount of people that are not there. Now, how do we go about getting more people there? And for me, it's definitely about doing a better job in showcasing what are the opportunities from a career point of view, from a policy making point of view, from a in the boardroom decision making point of view, from an entrepreneurial point of view, and let them see the possibilities, because women hold up half the world anyway. We hold up half the sky. And across the region, we are more than half of people who are participating online or have internet access. So we should be there just like anybody else. So it's kind of cool that we have a benchmark now. What we're going to do about it?
Yeah. For me, when I saw the story, what caught me was, I guess I was in Black Women Talk Tech.
Oh yes, in New York last week. Yeah.
And I sat on that panel, really talking about how to launch without, a CTO and
Chief Technical Officer. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, we live in that world. Sorry.
Yes.
But one of the comments somebody said, is like, I was so intrigued by that panel and what you guys accomplished. You didn't have a CTO or Chief Technical Officer to launch your product, but you guys are going out there and doing it. And I don't think it really struck me until that, and that was just a LinkedIn comment, like somebody who viewed it online. And so for me, I'm realizing, and for me, I've seen so many women in tech, that it's like one of those, I don't even think about it that there is this disparity, but looking at this study is like, hey, there is a disparity. And I guess for me, just being among my product lead is a woman. So for me, I don't necessarily see it. I just like, hey, are you competent? Can you do the job? Can you get me to where we need to go? And so I agree, we need to be intentional about it. But I also think that there needs to be events and activities around how women participate in these things and showing them what the career options are. Yeah. Because I think that for me, what I've seen in the region is where the disparity lies. And so, you need to have or see what you can be before you can go out and achieve it. I think that is where I think, we can do better and help those people along, and even those who are job switching, etc. What transferable skills do you have?
They need to be shown the path as well. Absolutely. As I was listening to you talk, and I realized that there is you can't deny it. There's a way that so many women have been socialized in terms of what their role and path should look like or be like in this world. And that's why we go around we have to tell others, telling young girls, telling other women that you work without permission. Do whatever it is that you want to do. Be okay with asking for help, to learning on your own, figuring out, use Google, on your own. Join communities that that you hear about. Use Google to find communities near you, whether they're online communities or they're events that are happening, and go learn. Go with an open mind and with your palm open to to just learn and collaborate and see what's going on and ask questions and be okay with failing. We have a very weird culture in the Caribbean where failure is demonized instead of it being seen as a natural part of your journey to success. And so, but most importantly, I think I just want to ask women and young girls is like, just work without permission. There's no one body holding you. You have access to the internet on your phone, on your laptop, on your whatever it is. Start with Google, join a community, find out what was going on out there, work without permission, and just begin. Because without you starting to learn, to experiment with certain things, nobody else can help you. If you don't already have that intention and that initiative and that drive, then nobody can hold you and just drag you along. It has to come from you first. So I look forward to maybe another 5 or so years when that number has reduced because of a whole bunch of initiatives. We can't wait on external people to help us. It's in our own hands to help ourselves, even as we maybe partner with others to do other initiatives. So that's my 2 cents.
And I 100% agree with what you've just said.
Yeah, so what's the item number 3, as you would say in Trinidad?
Boy. So number 3, TATT Digital Inclusion Survey raises question. So TATT is the Telecom Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, and they recently published a report on digital inclusivity
Mm,
survey. And so they're saying that it raises questions about how digital adoption and access projects are being managed in Trinidad and Tobago.
mm-hmm.
And the survey found an increase in the ICT development index, moving from 5.55 in 2013 to
Yeah.
approximately 7.86. So that's a 2 point something percent jump over the years. It says
Right.
the index is a measure of fixed telephone subscriptions, mobile
Right.
cellular subscriptions for every 100 citizens, internet bandwidth per user, the percentage of household, computer, blah, blah, etc. And so what this really was talking about, the question is because TAT gets money from the telecoms to operationalize their activities. And so it's
Mhm.
called the Universal Fund. Or
Oh, we
Universal,
have like that. We have that in Jamaica as well.
right.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so the question really is are the projects that you all are doing really
Ah.
hardwiring to schools or places like that, community centers, etc. Do
Mm.
they really make sense considering the fact that most of the population, we have over 100,000 people now, 200,000 activated telephone, mobile lines, etc. So it was really asking the question: are you making proper use of these funds? And
Mm.
so for me, I was just like, interesting. Somebody started asking the question because, again, the survey did point out that 3G is 100% used. 4G is still on the. For me, I'm on 5G right now, so I don't 3, 4. Don't even really matter. But the
Miami living,
question.
baby. Miami living.
But it varies across the country. When you travel, you can
Yes.
see, okay, yeah, Miami might be up, but some other places. But yeah, it really raises the question around how are these funds and just the management and again, that whole question we were just on in terms of people choices. What are the decisions that others are making in our favor? What are the decisions that these entities are making in terms of where they allocating the resources, and how does it really impact you and I as the end citizen? And does it allow us to be able to be digitally inclusive?
Yeah.
And so I think that coming out of it, the study did raise the right questions, and the authors who wrote this article. So I think it's very instructive. But again,
What is a overall policy though? In Jamaica, we have that same universal access or universal service fund, and
right,
like in Trinidad, they tax the telcos,
yep,
and use that fund, that money to supposedly, it's supposed to be used to enhance digital culture, meaning that greater access,
yes,
greater use for productive purposes and that kind of a thing. And we've had our issues here as well, where the money get used and you go on to a round robin and check on these community access points around the
yep,
country. You realize that they're all like more than half of them are closed, underutilized because there's no
yep.
follow-up. There is no consistency of and all that. So it's basically pissing in the wind.
And
So
that's the same thing that the survey found.
but so even though there's clearly a mandate in Trinidad as well from this
Mhm.
organization, but it's just a matter of if they're executing on that mandate as
Yeah,
well.
and Ingrid, you and I know that technology moves at the speed of light sometimes,
Yeah,
or technology moves faster than the policy implementation.
yeah,
So policy implementation always lacks, um, or lags, sorry, behind the implementation of
yeah,
the technology. And
yeah.
so it really, we have to become, and again, sometimes it's demanding that seat at the table. And I know we've had that conversation before, but really demanding a seat at the table to say, hey, this is what is required, because people's agendas become so skewed. People focus becomes, hey, I need this in my constituency so I can get reelected, right? That,
Absolutely. Happens in
that,
Jamaica too. Yep.
that's what somebody is saying to
Yep.
somebody. And it's
Yep.
like, okay, well,
Yep.
yeah, but, or they decide they're going to put on 20 of these sites in community centers, etc. But everybody has a 4G phone. Everybody has internet on their phone now. Is that really relevant 16, 18 months down the line? It
Yeah.
may not be. And so the implementation lags what is happening on the tech side. And so it may not really be relevant. So does that mean that, hey, that money should be used in reinforcing what this infrastructure is like? So moving us from 3G to 4G or from 4G to 5G, is that what necessary? And so we need faster cycle times. But if there's nobody in the room to ask these questions and say, hey, is that we're going to put down in that part of the country really relevant? And do the people really need more broadband or more broad bandwidth rather than having access point in a community center, which 80% of us ain't want to leave our home to just go to see the internet in somebody in some kind of community center. And so it really begs the question, who is at the seat of the table, and are the questions being asked to make sure that you have the right amount of eyes on the issue and policy persons, having the conversation? Because what I've found, some of us have so much ego, especially in the region, is like, we don't know and we don't want to say we don't know. And there's the plan, so we stick to the plans. But
without questioning the plans. I mean, because what it sounds like to me, because as I said, sometimes technology and the needs of a digital society changes over time without question. Right. So it means then that your policy should be flexible enough to meet the times as well. But I mean, when it comes to these access points, I mean, because we have these underutilized, closed, vandalized access points. But you go to a minister and they're happy to show you this map that shows all the points. They ask a second question about how many of them are open or doing anything. It's crickets, right? But why not? Since everybody's been complaining and also been stating that the Caribbean needs to upskill. And in terms of digital skills, we need to teach our people about digital skills, basic things about cybersecurity, being safe online. Maybe those are the things that should be taught in those access points. And why is it that there's nobody being held accountable for, changing the use of or reimagining the use of these access points or other projects that are on the ground? Who needs to hold them accountable? That's the question. Who needs to hold them accountable? Because all this money is just basically going to a bunch of people sitting in an office, maybe contracting out to whoever it is to put up these things, but there's no real impact. Who must be held accountable?
Yeah, and as you mentioned about the certification, the classes and being taught about cybersecurity, the first thing that jumped to mind was, hey, this is a perfect opportunity to create certification around these things. I had an interesting experience this week where I spoke to somebody from Comcast and they were out to Jamaica, and I know you don't like BPOs because you think that there's a better utilization of that resource. And the question is, could that person have helped me with multiple things besides just telling me about my Comcast bill? But in the end, I realized he was Jamaican, and we had a conversation. I was like, hey, well, yeah, when they're taking your next vacation, come to Jamaica. So homeboy was well referred for your country. But be that as it may, we need to make sure that we upskill our citizens, because cybersecurity and cyber threats are real. And having the skills and the know-how, so that, okay, yeah, I can start at BPO, but being able to talk to a customer, now I can jump over to cybersecurity because it's one of the things. So like I say, transferable skills, being able to talk to a customer is number one. Yeah. And that guy was way more friendly like some of the guys out to Asia you speak to some of these days who can't even understand what you're saying, but trying to talk English. So it's really important that I think that, again, a vision is important, and understanding where we need to go as a people. Those are, just the things that I see straight off the top.
Yeah, I think we should follow up with that, because we need to find out exactly, ask some of these individuals the tough questions, like how much money has been spent, for what is the impact, why hasn't there been change, and that kind of thing. So we're going to follow up and do a follow-up on this in terms of outer Jamaican trade, and maybe use those two countries to say, hey, this is how much money that was collected in taxes from the telco. This is how much money that this particular universal service fund is supposed to have gotten to do these things. What's the impact? What's the report on that, and why certain things have been done? We're going to follow up on that. That's for sure. So okay, so our last we're halfway through the show. Yeah, we have 3 more things to do before we wrap up and say have a good weekend. The next item is Caribshopper. E-commerce marketplace expands to Canada and the United Kingdom. So the CEO of Caribshopper, Cadian Preston, who runs a company with his brother Tennyson, said that they're now seeking to get Jamaican and Trinidadian products into these new diaspora markets, Canada and the UK, to expand. So basically expanding their export facilitation from their online market platform, Caribshopper.com, and they're also going to be looking to expand their services to entrepreneurs in Barbados, Belize, and Grenada. Now, Caribshopper is 6 years old, and they are one of around 24 Caribbean online shopping marketplaces where people can actually, whether they live in the region or live outside the region, can buy the best of the Caribbean. That's good to see, because before they were basically just, how Caribshopper started was like, hey, you're in the Caribbean, you want foreign things, or in other words, you want stuff from the United States, we'll help you to get it. And then they switched, they pivoted and said, yeah, no, it is best that we help Caribbean entrepreneurs of different, varying size operations to export their best products to the diaspora and make money. And of course, that is having way more impact on the Caribbean digital economy. What are your thoughts about that, sir?
I think that that's becoming a pretty crowded space. And I know I had a conversation with Kadian at some point.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see. I would say, I even heard about a new one at my demo day recently.
Yeah.
And so I think it's becoming pretty crowded.
Yep.
At this stage,
they're one of 24 right now.
I don't know what sets, and everybody thinks that they have a market. So the question is, who becomes the leader, who becomes dominant in this space? And I don't know that there's any dominant leader. I mean,
we need to gather some data around that, because everybody, as you said, is going to probably think, oh, well, yeah, we have the most viable product, or marketplace. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that Caribshopper is one whose name is out there. But in terms of, who is the leader, I do not know. I know that in Trinidad, there's like planting seeds. They have a marketplace that does something. So there's so many of them. As you counted 24, the question is, what sets each of them apart? And so there may be consolidation in this market sooner rather than if people are to survive, or some may just go out of business, because I don't know that the diaspora market can support 24 different of these and
well, diaspora, and of course the wider market in that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's gonna be interesting to watch it evolve. It's I didn't even realize it was 24 until I read this. I'm like, whoa, 24.
That was the last count, and I was like last year. But you're right. I think with the global economy sort of a slowing down, and with the rationalization in terms of markets, with the usual talk about that R word, recession, people are going to be thinking differently about how they spend their disposable income, and so there may be some sort of a pulling back in terms of spending, and that is without question going to affect what they buy and how they buy. And so you may see, there's either going to be some consolidation or some of those online marketplaces that actually are closed for business. So over the next, I would say, year, 18 months, we're definitely going to see if Caribshoppers move into fresh markets, is a signal that they are growing and they've found a sweet spot and they're doubling down on that, and diversifying their risk going into new markets. And so they may be one of the ones of the 24 that actually remain strong and grow over the next 18 months, because all the data and all the reports that I've read, it looks like it's going to be a very bumpy ride in some sectors for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's also about pivoting back into the region. It is, I would say, it is really tricky. And it's because, to me, is there isn't, I don't know who is the market leader. So I think that, Ingrid, when you go do your research, figure out who is the market leader, because
where we get the data from? That's the other part, right? You know, Caribbean people are allergic to data. Like, where is the data? You know what we could do? You know what we could do? Take a look, get you know, because that list of 24 marketplaces, maybe go to some site that will give you, say, for instance, like an overall traffic reading. So get a sense of what kind of traffic each of those marketplaces are getting and for what.
Yeah.
Maybe judge them based on, okay, well, this one is getting more or less. That is not necessarily a determinant of who is the market leader. They may be a market leader in terms of getting traffic and getting people coming through their doors. But that doesn't tell us in terms of their market share and how much revenue they're making per year. But it'll be interesting to at least try and grab as many pieces of data that we can find publicly about that, because I don't recall, or if, say, for instance, like First Atlantic Commerce, they said, the CEO said that they pretty much run 90% of e-commerce traffic over their platforms. They would have some very interesting data about the numbers that maybe, you know, people who, maybe some of those marketplaces use the First Atlantic Commerce platform. So maybe we could dive a little deeper to get some real data around that, and, you know, see if we can work around the data blind spots that exist in the Caribbean, because we seem to be allergic to that shit, right? But anyway, let's move on.
You're bringing me back to days when I used to present my bosses with data, and, you know, data wasn't really what was mattering to them, and it's just like, geez.
Yeah, they're picking things out of their armpit, right? It's like, yes, this is what we're going to go for. I mean, I'm a big believer in gut instinct, you know, I use it as well, but a little bit of data kind of help you go a long way, so you're not fucking delusional. Pardon my French, you're not flipping delusional, right?
Yeah, but you know, the rest of the world runs on deep data. You want to know if you're in a recession, 2 consecutive quarter of down whatever.
Yeah, down by 20% or something like that, right? That's
how you tell you in a recession.
Yeah.
These guys don't, you know, just pull it out of their armpits and say, hey, that's the way the wind blowing today. Okay, there's a recession.
Yeah,
it doesn't work so. And, you know, while, you know, one of the things I was looking at even recently was just around how we build businesses and how you have to build a business. Because when I'm talking to investors, they don't want to hear about, hey, well, you know, I've done so many of these things. The number one question is traction, revenue, this, that. So we have to become very cognizant, because at the end of the day, when people investing with you, and even Caribbean investors, they want to see data. They don't want to hear, well, Daniel, think this is a good idea. Do it. It may start there. So they want to know, how much return am I getting on my investment? So come on, we have to become very smart about using data and
about collecting data, collecting it, mastering it, and using it for strategic decision making. Absolutely. Absolutely. But anyway, let's move on to, we're talking about data, and we're talking about you know, money. I mean, this item is again, as we told you, fintech and crypto, you're going to hear a lot, because that's just what's dominating a lot across the region and the world as well. So we, as I alluded to earlier in the show, we're in a crypto winter right now. In other words, the markets are down. Like, there are a lot of, you know, businesses and funds and coins, tokens that have lost their value between 30 and 80 something percent. Bitcoin, which had a high of 69,000 per Bitcoin, is now hovering between 18 and 21, and the others are there. But funny enough, despite all that, cryptocurrency ownership and investment culture, or the crypto culture in that space, continue to be mainstreamed, and mainstreamed by not the crypto nerds and not necessarily the crypto startups, but by mainstream people themselves. There are these 3 things that popped out recently. The Bank of England said that the people who survive from this current crypto cash could be tomorrow's Amazons and eBays. And what it simply means, again, when markets crash, the strong survives. And they find ways of actually saying, oh my goodness, instead of just simply taking on money and burning through money, they said, no, we've got to make this thing be a profitable business sooner. And so the people who survive by taking the bitter medicine now and preparing themselves for growth later end up being the winners. The other little piece of stuff that I found was MasterCard, which is an American global payments card company. They just put out a piece of information saying that 51% of their consumers in Latin America, though, have already made a transaction using crypto. Yeah. And then Visa, their competitor, has just launched Bitcoin cards. Where again? Latin America, right? So it's kind of interesting. And then, of course, so those are like the mainstream guys who are saying, you know what, MasterCard and Visa are like, yo, this thing is going to happen. So we're going to have to either adapt or die. And they're choosing to find ways to facilitate the mainstreaming of cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency culture and the use of blockchain technology. And they seem to not necessarily be pushing so hard in their home turf in the United States. They're pushing outward. They've gone to Latin America, what I call green markets. So it's kind of interesting that we have these little bits and pieces of crypto culture or crypto mainstreaming even happening even regarding when this crypto crash is going on right now across the world. For me, I just see the crypto crash as an opportunity to buy. But again, this is not financial advice and I'm not your financial advisor. So please go. Well, it's kind of interesting to see that this cryptocurrency culture, again, is changing the way people make money, move money around the world.
Yeah.
But no, and I know you're quiet. I was like, yeah, because guess what, people? Daniel is not into crypto. He's not.
No, I'm into Bitcoin.
You're into Bitcoin?
Into blockchain, sorry.
Oh yeah, he's into the blockchain technology, not one of the fruits of blockchain technology, which is crypto. All right, I ain't mad at it.
I'm still on the fence.
I ain't mad at you.
But you know, blockchain is really, I think, where it's at.
Word to that.
For me, it's just, and you know, my conversation is really just the volatility in the market. I think that it's easier to explain blockchain, why it's necessary, the implications, and how it really. But you see, when it starts talking, and you know, after we have friends like Elon who could impact currencies, I'm like, hey, yeah. So I do think that, you know, MasterCard and Visa and all of these entities making these statements really helps to evolve and to make these things more mainstream. And so there is really a lot of places to go for this, but I like the development, but I wish we could have had, again, Ingrid, you know, just about the data. All of this really points to Latin America, and I'm like, okay, yeah, we'd love some Caribbean numbers to really go along with this. But
listen, it's going to be interesting. But I think as we track it, because I mean, Silicon Group is definitely going to be tracking the growth of fintech and crypto across the region for sure, and trying, you know, eke out as much data as possible. But I think the fact that without question that cryptocurrency is here to stay. I mean, I know some people would like to see it all go away and go to zero. Blockchain technology is here to stay. That, I mean, the more I read, the more I know, I realize that the blockchain technology is going to be, you know, the #1 platform that the next iteration of the web is going to be built on it, and it's going to hit every industry, not just crypto, which is, you know, financial services and investments and stuff like that. So for me, this information coming out of MasterCard and Visa and Bank of England, for me, and then with all of this within the context of right now that the markets are down in crypto, is a crypto crash or crypto winter, as they call it. I think now is a good time for some regulatory action that will protect people's digital assets, whether they're, you know, investing in it or investing in companies that are in there. Because without question, like with anything new, there are a lot of charlatans and a lot of scams. From the scammy funds to the scammy startups, they're there. So maybe a little bit of regulatory oversight, something that will allow the innovation to still breathe and grow, I think probably would be interesting to introduce. How is that done or what it is going to be interesting.
As you said, scammy startups. It reminded me of way back in the internet when we would get these calls from the Nigerians who would be telling you. So I'm like, yo, oh boy, it's going to be the wild, wild west when some of these.
It's been a wild west. I mean, them early days in the internet where some people call you and want you to pay tons of money just to get an email address, or you're spending millions of dollars just to get a website. You know what I mean? I mean, people, it's just the nature of all new industries. There are always going to be people who use it for bad, going to be, you know, scamming to get them up, because of course there's money to be made, and there are a lot of people who are still ignorant about how it works and how it can work for them. So that's why I don't believe in people should be demonizing crypto. They should learn about it and understand how it fits into the larger scheme of things in terms of what is the internet and this digital economy is evolving into. So
and Ingrid, I think that's kind of your role, and the role of others in the ecosystem is really about that education. I think that is critically important for any asset class. But also I think that, you know, to get people away from being off the cliff of, hey, I don't even want to see this, to hey, here's what it can do. And which is why for me the foundation of this is blockchain. And, you know, evolving that conversation, because I have listened to conversation. I'm not a crypto expert.
Neither am I.
I've heard conversations of people trying to explain this, and I'm like, geez, you know less about this than me. Maybe you should zip it.
Be quiet, yes.
And that's being politically correct, right?
Right.
And I'm like, you know, but you know, there's so many of them out there though who want, and they dive into, you know, crypto and what it should do for you and how it's protecting you. And I'm like, yo, dude, number one, you need to start off with what is the underlying technology behind this, why it is important, the security. People need to be comfortable about the security of this, the ledgers, you know, all digital security. What is it, and how it is, you know, mapped, and all those kinds of things before you start jumping into the deep end of this conversation. So I think that, you know, there is a lot of work by those who are advocates, really starting at the foundation, getting people comfortable. Once people are comfortable, then it's and as you said here, rightly, there's so many scams and some of these things that you have to be careful. But the question is, how do I know? You know, remember, I'm sure you remember the Amway days where everybody was trying to get you to go on Amway, and then people realize, hey, it's a kind of pyramid scheme if they come in.
Yes, very much so. It's part and parcel of industries growing and stuff like that. And as we talk about startups, not scammy ones, and as we talk about growth, you know, we're wrapping up now, guys. If you haven't guessed it yet, you're listening to This Week in Caribbean Tech. It's a weekly podcast from Silicon Caribbean where we basically give you some unfiltered insights into the latest Caribbean tech and business news, and of course, with all of this within a global context. And so we're on our final item to talk about today, because Daniel Smith, CEO of, let me grab my pen, of Keepingly, a property tech startup that got some angel funding a few months ago, and was accepted in accelerator programs, did a demo day with whom? So go ahead, tell us about it, Daniel.
So we did the Tech Beach Retreat accelerator program, and on Wednesday was demo day. So Ingrid got to see me in all my stiffness of looking into a camera and, you know,
pitching
about Keepingly and pitching, you know. I think that I love loose conversations. I think that, you know, having to look at a deck, you know, it kind of centers me, but it was an interesting experience. And it allowed me to understand, you know, we had like a final wrap up today. And what I said, you know, it was that it allowed me to understand what is going on in the Caribbean tech ecosystem, and seeing exactly what people are building. And we have evolved a long way from,
Yeah.
I know, Ingrid, where we were a few years ago, or
Yeah.
even talking about, how do we, I remember when First Atlantic was your only payment choice, so you had to go through Scotia Bank and pay 20,000 TT to get access on Scotia Bank's platform. And so I'm happy to see the evolution. For us, we took part in it because ultimately we are from the Caribbean, and I thought that it offered us certain advantages of being able to break into the ecosystem, at least even if we want to build backward into the Caribbean. But it was a very interesting experience.
How many startups pitched on demo day? Do you know?
About 12.
Around 12.
I think
Okay.
that there were more of us in the program, but I knew 12 pitched on them.
Okay, because I came in just when you gave me the link and saw you and a couple of others, and what I'm seeing so far in terms of I saw you're a prop tech, and I saw somebody in the social space, and I saw one fintech guy, then others that were interestingly too into mental health and self-care, and merging that space with tech. So that was interesting for me to see. I mean, which startups stood out for you, or which startups stood out for you on that demo day?
That's a kind of biased question. That's a leading question.
No, I mean, yeah, okay, you, all right, fine. I mean, you're but outside of you, you're like, that was an interesting startup, interesting problem they're solving.
The guys at Penny Pincher, I think, are doing some really important things. The startup which I connected with the most, which was, and I can't remember the name offhand, but I know the founder is Marsha Ray. And she's a Jamaican, and she's building along the lines of you being able to have documentation or life planning for death, and having all the documents. And for me, that kind of is similar to what we doing in terms of that whole documentation bit. But I loved what she is, really building. And I thought that, and we had a conversation as two founders, and it was like, hey, I never even thought about that. And it was that for me, it was like really, so outside of the fintech stuff, I think that there are other groups like My Selector, which gives you your customized playlist and have music from the Caribbean and stuff like that. And those are, pretty cool on the entertainment side. But, for long-term sustainability, okay, yeah, how do I plan my life? I love the concept that they were bringing. So yeah, those were like 2 to 3 that really stood out for me.
Okay, that's cool. So yeah, but you're right in terms of the evolution. I mean, I've listened to thousands of pitches across the Caribbean and the diaspora, and we've definitely come a long way just in terms of the problems that we're seeking to solve, the how we go around pitching, and that I think is I mean, because basically it's been like 15 years that I've been in the ecosystem. So if we didn't have any growth, then hello. Right, and that's a credit to a bunch of different things, a bunch of different players, initiatives from the government, initiatives from development banks. Yes, I'm actually giving you guys props, even though I don't like you much these days or before. But anyway, yeah. So I just think it's and just simply a lot of. But I think for the most part, I'm going to just declare my bias. For the most part, I think it's from entrepreneur to entrepreneur, and the collaboration and the sharing of skills, and watching each other fail, coming again, you're learning from that and trying again and having the space to do that. People, all these startups who have traveled and they share what they know with others. That entrepreneurial community, I think really is what's continue to drive things. And of course, there are always different players within an ecosystem that helps things, because no startup, no entrepreneur can be a success on their own. There's a whole bunch of, it takes a village, as they say, you know what I mean?
Yep.
But without question.
I do believe that statement 100%.
Yeah.
Because the things that we go through, even mentally, or just trying to build, or, fundraising, which is in and of itself a daunting task. I do think that, that is where, And I know you would have seen way more community than me, but I just believe that is where we need to, because, you know, even helping of resources, I had a conversation with somebody recently and they were like, hey, we did this and we went there and, you know, somebody's trying to keep me out of the company. And I'm like, but did you incorporate? Did you do this? Did you do that? And like, well, I was waiting on somebody. Like, okay, well, you need to start with incorporation, make sure that you sign off certain agreements. But when you're being a part of a community, would you know some of these things?
Exactly.
Because, you know, you may not, you have your expertise, you don't necessarily know the questions to ask,
Yeah.
but once you're a part of a community, you find a community, it helps you to be able to. So I think that is, I would say that is the number one thing.
Yeah.
I mean, funding is great, but when you have that community, it allows you to either experience things through other people's eyes, so you don't make the same mistake. So your acceleration and your runway is faster. So
absolutely. I think that's the faster and the more exposed and the more leeway that Caribbean entrepreneurs give themselves to experiment and to fail and to learn and to share and to collaborate and to create community through events or online, you know, online communities as well, and share and be open and do that sort of thing is the better that we become, because actually it's the underground work and the underground communities that even allow people to be even ready for an accelerator or an incubator or for funding or whatever it is. So I just encourage people to, you know, find your communities. I'm glad, as I mentioned in a previous show, that Kingston Beta is back. We have a new event coming up in July and a host of meetups and boot camps and everything. But there are other countries. I see Aruba is bringing back their tech conference. Barbados never missed a beat in terms of what 10 Habitat is doing there in Barbados. Trinidad is always doing their thing. And so there are these pockets of events and communities. There are online communities in Facebook and LinkedIn, you know, on Google, you know, in Telegram, in Discord, in Slack. Find them. You know, we have a listing on siliconcarib.com, but find them, Google about them, and join them, because I think being part of an entrepreneurial community is invaluable. There is magic in communities. So I'm really glad that that went well. Let's see who gets funded from this round.
And I would just add to and community. I think that networking within that community, because you could have the community, but if you're not speaking or you're not conversing or asking questions, and finding somebody in the community who, you know, you can really go one-on-one with, I think really helps to amplify, because you may miss something. Like I have a friend who's like, hey, you look at this, or you thought about that, or you applied to this. And so we like one-off on each other in terms of, you know, checking on things, or that what you should apply to, or what is coming up in the ecosystem. And it gives you a way to being accountable. And that accountability part is really what I think, you know, helps sustain you in this journey, because between burnout, between a pandemic, between everything that we are all suffering and living through, you know, depending on your circumstance, I think, you know, starting a company is no easy feat. And so, you know, just having those resources, I think, are important. So
that's a fine way to end. That's a beautiful way to end. I appreciate that. Thank you, Danielle, on this Friday. We're going to drop it, of course, on our Silicon Carib TV on channel on YouTube. So you can watch us on Silicon Carib TV channel on YouTube. You can listen to us on Google Podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And that's it for this episode of This Week in Caribbean Tech from Silicon Carib. If you found something of value, please to comment, on YouTube, give us a nice 5-star rating on whatever podcast platform you used. Click that button and subscribe, and of course, be generous and share with your friends and your colleagues that you listen to This Week in Caribbean Tech, and to help us grow so we can continue to spread our Caribbean entrepreneurial stories or insights about what is popping in the Caribbean digital economy. So we'll see you back here And you're going to be hearing us again next week, Friday, for another episode. My name is Ingrid Riley.
And I'm Daniel Smith. This week in Caribbean Tech.
I love it. People, take it easy. Have a fantastic weekend.